Imagine being in the one place where you can finally let your guard down, surrounded by the people you trust most, only to face a shock so unexpected it leaves you reeling. Now, imagine that this happened not just to anyone, but to Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll himself. In a private sanctuary where he sought peace from the prying eyes of the world, Elvis found himself blindsided by an insult so cruel it left him visibly shaken, and what happened next would change everything. Elvis, who dazzled millions with his voice and charm, had a softer, hidden side that few ever saw, a side that could be deeply hurt. Today, we're diving into this untold story, where a single encounter brought one of the world's biggest stars to an unguarded moment of heartbreak and disbelief. What exactly happened that night? Stay with us as we reveal every surprising detail of this unforgettable incident. Number 5. Setting the stage. Elvis Presley was known for his magnetic presence, his on-stage confidence, and a voice that could captivate crowds of thousands. But behind the spotlight, behind the fame, and behind the dazzling image that defined him as the king, there was another side of Elvis, one few fans ever saw. Fame wasn't just a dream come true for him, it also brought immense pressure, isolating him in ways that only those closest to him could truly understand. Beneath his swagger and iconic moves lay a deeply sensitive man who, despite his worldwide fame, was often hurt by the smallest of slights. This vulnerability, hidden from the public eye, was a part of Elvis that only his inner circle knew, and it often made the harshness of fame a painful reality for him. To cope with the constant pressures and scrutiny, Elvis carved out safe spaces where he could momentarily escape the demands of his fame. Among these, his favorite was the Memphian Theater in Memphis, a place he would often rent out entirely, allowing him the luxury of watching a movie like a regular person without the crowds or flashing cameras. This theater wasn't just a venue, it became a haven for him, a place where he could unwind, joke around, and relax with friends and family, his inner circle, who were always by his side. It was in these quiet, intimate moments that Elvis felt most at ease, letting go of the barriers he put up for the outside world. Here, he could just be Elvis, free from judgment or expectation. But, as with many safe places, even the Memphian wasn't always free from intrusions. In these private gatherings, the world-famous rock star sometimes came face to face with the very realities he was trying to escape. On one particular night, a chance encounter during what should have been a peaceful evening at the theater changed everything. What unfolded was more than a mere disturbance. It was an experience that shook him to his core, piercing the very sanctuary he had built for himself. This moment, which we'll reveal in full detail later in the video, shows just how vulnerable Elvis could be, and it underscores the challenges he faced, even in the spaces where he felt safest. Stay tuned as we uncover the story behind this unforgettable night. Number 4. The event unfolds. It was a warm evening in Memphis in the mid-1970s, and Elvis Presley, seeking a rare moment of peace, retreated to one of his most cherished escapes, the Memphian Theater. With him were his close friends, members of the Memphis Mafia, and his girlfriend at the time, Linda Thompson. For Elvis, this was a perfect night. Just him, a private theater, and the people he trusted most, where he could let his guard down and forget the pressures of fame, if only for a few hours. He laughed and chatted freely, feeling the comfort of being with those who understood him. But as the night wore on, a quiet tension began to brew, one that would soon turn this seemingly ordinary evening into a heartbreaking memory. During a break from the movie, Elvis wandered over to the concession stand to grab a quick snack, an everyday act for anyone else, but one that held rare significance for him. At that moment, he was simply a man at the movies, blending into the normalcy he often craved. But before he could enjoy his brief moment of freedom, an older woman nearby launched into a tirade that shattered the calm. She accused Elvis of failing to pay for services, claiming her daughter, who worked at the theater, had not been compensated for her work that evening. This accusation struck Elvis unexpectedly, a sharp and public affront that cut through his sense of peace. But instead of responding with anger, he maintained his usual politeness, calmly assuring the woman that he had indeed paid in advance, as he always did when renting out the theater. Yet, the woman wasn't satisfied. Her words grew sharper, her tone more hostile, as she continued to berate him. She claimed he was neglectful and inconsiderate, dismissing the very people who served him. Despite Elvis's attempts to defuse the situation with apologies, her hostility escalated and she began attacking him personally. Each insult landed like a blow, visibly affecting him in a way few people had seen before. As the woman continued, her accusations became even crueler, casting aside any notion of respect. She made remarks that went beyond the situation, hinting at personal grievances and finally, crossing a line that would leave Elvis stunned. This confrontation, as simple as it may have seemed to outsiders, would leave a mark on him, one that would linger long after the night was over. Number 3. The insult that shook Elvis. As Elvis stood there absorbing the woman's angry words, he maintained his composure, showing a grace and politeness that had always been a part of his character. He apologized again, hoping this would bring an end to the uncomfortable scene. But just as he turned to walk away, the woman delivered one final, cutting insult that sliced through his calm like a knife. "You're fat." For a moment, everything stopped. That word hung in the air, echoing louder than anything she'd said before. It wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a blow aimed directly at one of his deepest insecurities. Elvis had struggled with his image for years, aware of how he looked on stage, how he appeared in the press, and how fame had magnified every change in his body. This brutal remark hit him harder than anyone around him could have anticipated. The impact of her words was visible in an instant. Those closest to him watched as the usual sparkle faded from his eyes, replaced by a look of shock and hurt that couldn't be hidden. Elvis, who always seemed larger than life, suddenly looked small, wounded, and profoundly vulnerable. Without a word, he turned and walked away from the concession stand, his movements slow and heavy, as though the weight of her words had physically affected him. As he made his way back to the car, his entourage followed in a somber silence, sensing the gravity of what had just transpired. The laughter and lightheartedness of the evening had evaporated, replaced by an almost tangible sadness that lingered in the air. Those who knew him best could see the effect it had on him, and there was an overwhelming sense of helplessness among them. They wanted to console him, but the pain in his eyes suggested that this wound ran too deep for words to heal. Sitting in the car, surrounded by his closest friends, Elvis was unusually quiet. Gone was the relaxed, joyful man who had entered the theater earlier, replaced now by someone who seemed lost in a world of self-doubt and confusion. He kept repeating, almost in a whisper, "What did I do? Why would she say that?" Those words, spoken in a voice heavy with hurt, were heartbreaking for those around him to hear. They had always seen him as a strong figure, someone who held himself together in the face of fame's harsh spotlight. But in that moment they saw a side of Elvis that reminded them he was just as human, just as vulnerable as anyone else. The ride back was somber, each person reflecting on what had happened, while Elvis sat quietly, wrestling with a pain that none of them could quite reach. Number 2. Aftermath and the emotional impact. Back at Graceland, the sadness from the evening lingered heavily around Elvis. The cruel words from the theater replayed in his mind, each repetition deepening his distress. He paced slowly, lost in thought, his face etched with an expression of disbelief and hurt. Why would she say that? He kept asking, more to himself than to anyone around him. Elvis was known for his kindness and generosity. He went out of his way to make those around him feel valued. The insult felt like a betrayal, a wound made sharper by the fact that it happened in one of his few safe spaces. His close friends and family watched him, their hearts breaking for the man who had given so much to others, yet received such unkindness in return. Elvis's repeated question, "What did I do?" was a glimpse into the vulnerable man he hid from the world, someone who simply couldn't understand how anyone could carry such bitterness toward him. But even in the midst of his hurt, Elvis's natural kindness shone through. After retreating to his room, he shared an idea that stunned those close to him. Despite everything that had happened, he was still thinking about the woman's daughter, the young concession worker at the theater. Remembering her, he suggested something that seemed unimaginable after such an interaction. He wanted to send her a car. His friends were astonished, struggling to comprehend how, after being publicly insulted and humiliated, he was still thinking of a generous gesture. For Elvis, this was his way of responding to pain, by finding a way to turn it into kindness. To him, the daughter was innocent in the matter, and he couldn't bear the thought of her being affected by her mother's actions. His inner circle quickly protested, urging him not to follow through with the plan. To them, it seemed unfathomable to reward such behavior, to give a lavish gift to someone who had caused him so much pain. But Elvis, true to his character, was still drawn to the idea, wanting to do something meaningful. His friends had to firmly remind him that there was no need to carry the burden of others' bitterness, especially when it had been so unfairly directed at him. Eventually, they convinced him to let it go, gently steering him away from his plan, reminding him that he didn't have to shoulder everyone's pain. This moment, though, showed the depths of his kindness. Even after being wounded, Elvis still felt compelled to give, reflecting the generous spirit that those closest to him cherished deeply. Number 1. Turning pain into laughter. As the night wore on and Elvis returned to the familiar walls of Graceland, his close friends and family immediately surrounded him with warmth and support. They knew that words alone couldn't erase the sting of the insult he'd endured, but they were determined to lift his spirits. They stayed by his side, offering quiet comfort in the ways only those who truly loved him could. His cousin Billy, his girlfriend Linda, and the rest of the Memphis Mafia all shared a deep loyalty to Elvis, and they understood just how much a cruel word could cut through his defenses. They had seen him endure the pressures of fame, but this moment felt different, more personal, more raw. So, in their gentle ways, they tried to remind him of his worth, showing him the respect and admiration he always gave to others. In time, the tension began to ease as they all settled into a comforting familiarity. Elvis, still feeling the hurt but sensing the love around him, looked up and caught his own reflection in a mirror across the room. With a faint smile breaking through the sadness, he cocked his head, gave himself a once-over, and declared, "Damn, I'm a good-looking son of a botch." This light-hearted moment, though simple, shattered the heaviness in the room. Linda immediately chimed in with a playful, "You sure are," and laughter broke out among the group, filling the air with a sense of release. It was a moment that pulled Elvis out of his sadness, reminding him of the humor and strength that always lay within him. With their laughter, his friends helped him reclaim a little bit of the confidence that cruel words had momentarily stolen, bringing him back to the Elvis they knew and loved. We'd love to hear what you think. Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. How does this story change the way you see Elvis? Or maybe you have your own favorite memory of him. Let us know. We're excited to read your insights and start a conversation with all of you.